call this morning just to tune up my voice for you, so it's not okay. This first story is called The Beautiful Tiger by Christopher Goose. There once was a beautiful and powerful tiger. One day she was captured by a mean and cruel man who put her into a cage. The man kept the cage in the jungle not far from his house. Every day he would bring out a bowl of water and some food for the lonely tiger. Sometimes the tiger would see her own reflection in the bowl of water and she would say, "My, I must be a beautiful tiger." When the man heard her say this, he would lie and tell her, "No, you are not a beautiful tiger. You're very ugly. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, the tiger would believe the man. Some days after she ate her food, she would walk back and forth in her small cage and feel energy and power moving through her body. And she would say, "My, I must be a powerful tiger." When the man heard her say this, he would lie and tell her, "No, you are weak and puny. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, the tiger would believe the man. Then one day, when the man was nowhere around, a lion happened to walk by the cage. The lion saw the tiger inside and spoke to her, "Beautiful and powerful tiger, what are you doing lying about in that cage?" "Do not make fun of me," replied the tiger. "I know that I am neither beautiful nor powerful." "I'm not making fun of you," said the lion. "You are surely the most beautiful and powerful tiger I have ever seen. I am only surprised to see you lying here when you are clearly strong enough to break out of that cage." "You really think I could break out of here?" asked the tiger. "Quite easily, I should think," replied the lion. The tiger was not so sure at first. She had been told for so many times that she was a weak and pitiful creature. But suddenly it seemed that she could feel energy and strength moving through her body. She began to pace back and forth in her cage, and then, almost without thought, she leapt against the cage door, and it flew open without any resistance. Once outside, she seemed dazed. That cage didn't even have a lock on it. "I spent so much of my life stuck in there, and the door wasn't even locked." The lion looked at her with soft brown eyes and said, "Those kinds of traps don't need locks, for it is in the lies that we believe that keeps us in our cages, and it is the truth that sets us free." This next story is by Reverend Shari Woodbury. Once upon a time, Sky Woman fell from the sky. In the telling relayed by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Sky Woman fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear or maybe hope, she clutched to a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, Sky Woman saw only dark water below. But in the emptiness, there were so many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there was a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled towards them. The Sky Woman's story goes on to tell how the animals helped this first woman on earth. The geese break her fall. The animals call a council to decide what to do. A great turtle offers his back for Sky Woman to rest on. It is decided the divers among the creatures will try to bring up some mud from the bottom of the water because Sky Woman needs land. Otter, beaver, and sturgeon dive without success. At last, muskrat, the weakest diver of all, volunteers to try. So begins a story, a creation story taught down from the generations of the Potawatomi Nation, among other native peoples of the Great Lakes region. Or perhaps you've heard the creation stories captured in Genesis, the first book of the Jewish Torah and Christian Bible. Once upon a time, God created the heavens and earth. He swept a wind over the face of the waters and created light and land, plants and creatures of the air, sea, and earth. Last, God created humans, both male and female, in his own image. He said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over all of the animals." That's from the first account in Genesis. There's another telling of creation in the same collection. Once upon a time, God created man. He thought man needed a partner, so he created animals, one after another. The man named each kind of creature, but none was a sufficient partner for him. So finally, when the man was sleeping, God took a rib from the man and used it to create woman as a partner. These first humans learn that they are welcome to eat from every tree in the lush garden, all except one. God tells them not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The only animal that stands out as a real character in this story is the snake. Rather than helping the humans as the animals do in the Sky Woman story, in the ancient Middle Eastern tale, the snake persuades the woman, and through her, the man, to eat the forbidden fruit. Now, if these stories are being told on television, we would have a commercial break right now. Stories are built on conflict, and the suspense is what makes them juicy. How will Sky Woman, who needs land, survive in a watery world? What will happen to Adam and Eve, the first couple in the Genesis story, when God realizes that they have broken the one rule he laid down? You might say that humans are obsessed with stories. In his book, The Storytelling Animal, Jonathan Gottschall observes, "Neverland is our evolutionary niche, our special habitat. It turns out that people spend more time in imaginary worlds, books, daydreams, tall tales, and so on, than we do in the real world. And stories aren't just a way to test different what-if scenarios and make better decisions. They serve the important functions of illuminating right and wrong, and encouraging people to behave in ways that are good for whole societies." At their best, mythological stories like those of Sky Woman and Adam and Eve teach us important truths about who we are and how life is. We left Sky Woman sitting on a turtle with her new animal friends trying to breed her some land. Kimmerer's storytelling continues. A stream of bubbles rose with the small red body of the muskrat. He had given his own life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." As the story continues, Sky Woman spreads the mud across the turtle's shell. She offers a song of thanksgiving and dances in gratitude on this new bit of earth. Through the alchemy of the animal's gifts, the Sky Woman's gratitude, the land grows and grows until the whole earth is made. This is where the name Turtle Island comes from. Kimmerer continues, like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world reach out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered into the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals, too, had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. And so humans and animals go on living in harmony in this home of abundance. It's a happily ever after story. The story for Genesis, as you know, does not have such a feel-good ending. After eating the forbidden fruit that gives the knowledge of good and evil, the first couple experience shame about their bodies and sexuality. They cover themselves. When God comes walking through the garden, they hide. What does God do when he discovers that Eve and Adam have disobeyed him? He punishes all of them, womankind from birth pains and, patriarchy forever. Mankind with a life of hard toil in order to survive. Even snakes get their comeuppance, having to slither on their bellies henceforth and be mortal enemies with humans. The fall of Adam and Eve is a very different story than the fall of the Sky Woman. Sky Woman's story teaches humans about humility, gratitude, and our interconnectedness with the rest of life. The Genesis story, on the other hand, encouraged people to value obedience more than curiosity, to see themselves as ruling over the animal kingdom, and to feel separate from other creatures and from God. Whereas Sky Woman begins human society in a lush garden of earth. Adam and Eve get kicked out of the garden. To the end, their story is the beginning of life of scarcity and hardship. People tell stories around campfires and while putting little children to bed. We tell stories of worship. We read in many mediums and take in stories through radio and television. One of the most powerful mediums of story today is cinema. Just the theme song of a powerful movie can bring the whole arc and message of the story back into awareness. Unfortunately, as with the beautiful tiger in the story you heard as the reading, people can believe their stories they are told, and when they are not fundamentally true. Even then, those stories needlessly trap them. So it matters greatly which kinds of stories we are telling and retelling, and which stories we are listening to. The Meta Center for Nonviolence observes, to change the direction of politics, we have to change the implicit narrative or story that it's based on. And today we have a great opportunity to do that. All of us can be involved in this critical change. For the last couple of centuries, another story had a strong influence in our culture. This is a story that came from science, and it maintains a strong grip on our imaginations, even though science itself has evolved beyond this story. Here's how the Meta Center describes what it calls the old story and the new story. The old story that came to dominate our thinking in the West about the time of the Industrial Revolution. It held that everything consists of matter, and several assumptions followed. Being inert matter, there is naturally no meaning to the universe. Evolution is a series of random events. There is no way to explain how human beings can think and feel. And most importantly, we are separate from one another and the planet, which keeps us always on the verge of competition, if not outright violence. because we can only be satisfied by more and more outside resources. Finally, there is no way to change this situation. We are the result of our genes, or physical brain, or outside forces. Sounds a little bit grim, doesn't it? But that isn't the end of the story from science. The worldview of science materialism, Meta goes on to explain, encountered a severe shock when Einstein's theory of relativity, and especially with Max Planck's discovery that what we thought was solid matter is in fact an indeterminate field of possibilities that resembles consciousness more than stuff, and the entire universe is deeply interconnected. Thus, science came back into alignment with timeless traditions of human wisdom that had always maintained that human beings are body, mind, and spirit with an as yet unrealized destiny. This new story is, of course, not brand new. It is where ancient wisdom and the leading edge of science meet. And the Meta Center suggests it is an invaluable resource for social change activists. That's because of what the new old story teaches about human nature, including how deeply interconnected we are with each other and all of nature. We Unitarian Universalists affirmed this story when we adopted the seventh principle in the mid-1980s, recognizing the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Regardless of whether we are seeking out stories, we will keep hearing them. The universe is made of stories, not atoms, poet Muriel Rukeyser writes. In addition to these stories, we choose to put into our consciousness through what we read, watch, and listen to, what one marketer calls the story wars, are raging all around us. Chances are we are taking in stories that advertisers, politicians, and power seekers want us to hear. Stories that may not serve us well. When it comes to those mythological stories that shape whole cultures, whether they come in the form of storybooks, films, or political slogans, we can choose which ones to believe. We can write new stories, and we can rewrite old stories to better reflect the truth as we know it, and to support the well-being of all. This summer, I attended a theological panel of Unitarians from several countries. My colleague Norbert Rance from Transylvania, a member of the panel, made me smile when he talked about reinterpreting the story of Adam and Eve. Norby, as he was affectionately known, argued that the dominant interpretation of that story in Christianity today, as articulated by Paul of Tarsus, is wrong. It shows God as an omnipotent character whose primary action is to entrap human with this tree of knowledge and its forbidden fruit. This is a God who is oriented toward punishment and control. Norby gives the story of a different twist. Eating the fruit, he suggested, symbolizes becoming aware of our being and identity, naked and all. Thus is born the moral sense and social responsibility. Thus is also born freedom, as we experience a thirst for truth and meaning and become seekers. Eating the fruit of knowledge actually brought the human closer to God, which made it worth the cost of becoming aware of death. Jesus, in Norby's telling, shares the same intrepid spirit of Eve and Adam. He was after the truth, and he was willing to give his life for it. What was that truth? That there is a way to overcome what we face. Jesus' core teaching, Norby said, can be found in these biblical lines. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And you shall love your neighbor as well. That leads naturally to the question, what kind of God is this God who is one? Not a God of punishment and control, not a God who traps or condemns. Rather, Norby describes the God of his understanding as an ever-pulsating fountain of love. Now that's a story I can get behind. Robin Wall Kimmerer, who brought Sky Woman to my attention, reflects on the stories of Sky Woman and Eve as her story has more often been told. Kimmerer writes, "We are inevitably shaped by our stories, no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman, Sky Woman, is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other, Eve, was in exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. And then they met," Kimmerer observes, "the offspring of Sky Woman and the children of Eve, and the land around us bears the scars of that meeting. The echoes of our stories, they say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And I can only imagine the conversation between Eve and Sky Woman. Sky Woman says to Eve, 'Sister, you've got the short end of the stick. So much is at stake. For if we don't help change the stories that dominate our culture, we stand the very real risk of turning that old story into the fall of a self-fulfilling prophecy and expulsing ourselves from our own homes. Instead of turning the earth from brown to green as Sky Woman did to the benefit of all creatures, we are turning the earth from green to brown as climate change threatens life for all of our garden home. What to do? We could turn for understanding to stories that teach the truth of our interdependence and the importance of humility and generosity, like Sky Woman's story. We could reinterpret the powerful myths of the West, as Norbert Rance does, putting into practice its lessons, to have courage to face even those truths that are difficult, like death and planetary destruction, to love a divine oneness, and to act on our love of our neighbors. We can write new stories, like the beautiful tiger, that teach our children that they are beautiful and powerful and free. So let us choose carefully the stories we tell and the stories we listen to, that we may restore an earth that is green and live out the truth that all her creatures are one. May it be so. Amen.